I'm Nicole Rose Gellermino. I am a teaching artist. Welcome to my workshop on mastering paintbrushes.
I love painting. Dragging the wet brush across the dry page, seeing my brushstroke transform the surface of the page. It's bliss, it's exhilarating, and it's simple. But I wasn't born knowing how to use a paintbrush. The more that I paint, the better I get at manipulating the paintbrush. Right now I am painting with a material called India ink. It's basically made of charcoal, water, and enamel. It's quite thin and flows. What do you notice about my brush strokes, the marks and lines that are made by the brush? There's a lot of different types of brush strokes I'm making. Some are thin, some are curved, some are thick, some are straight. How am I getting the width of the brush stroke to change from thick to thin, or from thin to thick? I'm changing the amount of pressure I put on the paintbrush. When I press down on the paintbrush, the bristles spread out on the page and I make thicker lines. When I lift up on the paintbrush, only the tip is touching the paper and it makes thinner lines. Now I'm using a flat brush. The same is true of a flat brush. You can press down to make wider lines and lift up to make thinner lines. The flat paintbrush, which is shaped such like house painting brush, also has two different edges. One edge is thin, the other edge is wide. So when I experiment with what direction I'm painting in, I can make thin or wide lines depending on the direction I paint with a flat brush. I wonder if you can tell what part of my body is moving the most as I paint. It's not my wrist, it's my arm. That's another secret of mastering the paintbrush. Moving your entire arm will give you a lot more control because that's a lot more muscles. Now I'm using tempera paint. It's a thicker, non-toxic paint. Loading your brush is also a very important consideration. Experiment with how much paint you load onto the brush and how little you load on. Notice when I keep loading my brush over and over again, I get a smooth, rich brush stroke. When I run out of paint and I let the brush keep going, I get a light, dry brush stroke. That's called scrumbling. If you would like to make brush strokes that are smooth and opaque and creamy, then keep loading your brush. Also, if you want your brush strokes to be even and clean, then be sure to load your brush only on the tips of the bristles, just on the tip. And also, try to get an even amount of paint all around the tip of the bristle, not too much paint on one side. Here again I'm using a flat brush and changing the direction in which I'm painting to create thin or thick lines. You'll notice that it's very easy to make straight lines with the flat brush, especially when I move my whole arm. If you don't have paintbrushes at home and you can't afford to buy them or can't get to a store, you can make your own. This collection I have on the left is handmade from everyday items I found in my house. or also items I found in nature. Click the link below to see my video on how to make homemade brushes. Homemade brushes are special because you can get a wider variety of brush strokes that you can't get with store-bought ones. If you don't have paint or ink at home, there are lots of ways of making paint from household materials, which you can learn about in the links below. Or you can simply paint with water on colored paper, as I'm doing here. It will dry and disappear, but you can use your camera phone to take photographs of what you made. Mohammed Essai, an Iranian artist, is one of the greatest living masters of the brushstroke. Building on traditional Persian calligraphy, he experiments with brushstroke to design passages from the Quran or Persian poetry. His paintings blend spirituality, visual play, and light, and a range of influences. You can learn more about Mohammed Essai and his work by visiting the website we're looking at now, which is linked below. Wang, a living Chinese artist, also brings traditional calligraphy to another level. While Essai's brushstrokes are clean and controlled, Dongling drifts in the opposite direction. He experiments with oversized brushes, paper, and inkwell to suggest traditional Chinese characters. As he releases control of the brush, the ink takes on unexpected forms and the characters take on new life. You can learn more about the work of Wang Dongling by clicking on the link below to the website we're seeing now, inkstudio.com. To begin experimenting with brushstroke, you'll need a variety of brushes. You can choose flats, rounds, house painting brushes. You can use handmade brushes. You'll need paint. Tempera paint is a great choice, or acrylic paint. You can use ink. You can even use egg dye, or if you don't have any of that, you can just use water and a camera. Be sure to set up a workspace that you can get messy in. What do we know about paint? Well, it sticks to the page, it has color, and it moves. Its ability to move is provided by water, whether you're using ink, watercolor, house paint, or acrylic paint, it's got water in it. What kinds of forms does water take? Drops, drinking water, oceans, ice, fog, sleet, snow. Water makes up 75% of the human body. It gives life. It also causes huge hurricanes that can destroy life. Water is a force. It has a life of its own. It can freeze, drip, crash, splash, flow, swell, ripple, drift, boil, trickle, drizzle, pour. Painting is impossible without the force of water. What kinds of brushstrokes might you use to show the many different actions of water? Where on the page will you begin? How much ink or paint will you load onto your brush? What kind of a brush might you use? What direction will you paint in? How slow or fast will you paint? How wide will your brushstrokes be? How much pressure will you put on the brush? How might you use the brushstroke to show the movement of this incredible force called water? If you care for your brushes correctly, they will last a lifetime. If you're using water-based paints or inks, you don't really need to use soap, especially if you've been keeping the paint and ink at the tip of the bristles. Just plunge your brushes into a big cup of water and refresh the water as needed. Keep plunging and checking those bristles until the bristles come out completely clean. Reshape your brush by squeezing out excess water and shaping it into its original form. Dry it flat, not upside down. For thicker paints or a very messy brush, you will need to use your fingers to work the paint out like you're washing your own hair. This video was made in partnership between myself, Nicole Rose Gellermino, and the Luther Burbank Center for the Arts for their Let's Be Creative video series, which airs with a brand new workshop every Tuesday at 3:30 p.m.